All too often, strategy is something that happens once a year as part of the strategic planning cycle. That's when it's time to sit down and put on your strategic thinking hat. Unfortunately, the stuff that impacts on your organization is constantly changing. So it's important to continually monitor developments that affect your industry so that you can anticipate changes and make adjustments. That adaptive approach is what Mintzberg described as emergent strategy. It arises from unplanned actions and initiatives within the organization taken in response to unexpected opportunities or changes to the competitive dynamics and macro-level factors that shape your business context. That landscape is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It means that you should regularly be making time for strategic thinking. To be in the correct mindset requires switching gears, removing yourself from the daily grind and details to reflect on that bigger picture, really thinking things through. It takes time, and it's a lot easier said than done. In 2015, the Harvard Business Review published Freek Vermeulen's 5 strategy questions every leader should make time for. Those questions are represented here by these 5 images. Asking yourself these questions can help you to shift your focus to the big picture. The classic iPod was incredibly popular. In 2007, around 48% of Apple's revenue came from iPod sales, and it was announced that 100 million units had been sold since its introduction, making it at that time the best-selling digital music player ever. So, it may have been a surprise when Steve Jobs announced that it would be discontinued. But it was also in 2007 that the first iPhone was launched. The big picture at that time was about touchscreen devices, and the buttons and dial of the classic iPod did not fit that picture. So the first strategic question is, what does not fit? Consider the various activities and business portfolio of your organization. Individually, they might make sense, but can you explain why they work well together? Is there a real synergy? If not, it may be time to reassess. The next image represents a new starter. It's linked to a story about Andy Grove from Intel. Intel started out as a disruptive new entrant into the memory chip market during the 1960s and 70s. In the early 80s, Intel's dominant position was under threat from Japanese competitors. Profits were down. There was debate about whether to focus on building better memory chips or to refocus on the new partnership with IBM to supply microprocessors for PCs. Grove and Gordon Moore, a founder and at the time CEO, were committed to the memory business that had made them. Intel not making memory chips would be like Ford getting out of cars, or so Moore is said to have said. Grove asked Moore, if the board brought in a new CEO, what do you think that he would do? This was a time when all senior execs were men. He would get us out of memories, came the swift response. You can imagine the dramatic pause that followed. And then, according to legend, Grove said, why shouldn't we walk out of that revolving door, come back in, and do it ourselves? It led to Intel moving away from the memory chip business and focusing on microprocessors, followed by over 10 years of 30% increases in annual revenues. The second strategy question is, what would an outsider do? If someone else took my job, what would they do? This question helps you to identify when you're committed to something that was right in the past but that no longer makes sense. The image represents Alfred West. He was the founder and CEO of a successful wealth management company. In 1990, SEI was worth $195 million. After a skiing accident, West was hospitalized for 3 months. He had plenty of time to think. SEI were developing a new operating platform for investment advisors. Innovation was key to their success. West realized the underlying organization of the business was no longer suitable. He implemented a new team structure and streamlined the company policies and procedures to reduce bureaucracy. SEI experienced rapid growth as a result. Its market value has increased from $1.7 billion in December of 1998 to $8.7 billion in April 2024. Question 3 is my organization consistent with my strategy? If you were designing the organization from scratch to deliver your strategic goals, what would it look like? What needs to change? The next strategy question is, Do I understand why we do it this way? It's not unusual during training sessions when we ask the question, what's the reason for doing it that way? And the answer is, that's the way we've always done it. Or, with a roll of the eyes, that's how everyone in the industry does it, but with no real explanation. The image represents British newspapers. Vermeulen shares a story of his time working for one of the large newspaper companies. Why are they so big? He asked, to which the answer was, all quality newspapers are big. Customers wouldn't want it any other way. In 2003, The Independent started producing a tabloid or compact edition, carrying exactly the same content. Circulation increased, and in May 2004, they stopped producing the broadsheet version. The Guardian switched to the Berliner, a mid-sized format, in September of 2005. Commuters preferred the easier-to-read formats, which was more convenient for public transport, and The Guardian also adopted the tabloid format in January of 2018. It turns out that the British newspaper companies originally adopted the broadsheet format not because of perceived status, but because in 1712 the English government started taxing newspapers by the number of pages printed. Larger pages allowed the same number of words to be printed on fewer pages, reducing the tax burden. The law was abolished in 1855, but the printers continued to use the same format. The practice started for good reasons, but when organisations continue to do things automatically, even though circumstances have changed, it's likely that there is a better way available. The final image represents in vitro fertilisation, or IVF clinics in the UK. In the article, Vermeulen talks about research findings from a study that he completed with a colleague from University College London. In the UK, in order to increase market transparency, the government mandated that clinics publish their success rates based on the percentage of births resulting from treatments. However, this resulted in some clinics selecting relatively easy patients to treat in order to boost short-term success rates and to climb higher on league tables. The research suggests the lost learning and development opportunities that would come from a more representative patient population led to a lower relative success rate in the long run. Question 5, then, is my favourite strategic question. What might be the long-term consequences? It is, of course, difficult to measure. It might achieve short-term results when an organisation puts training and recruitment on hold to deliver savings. When it works, it's likely to be used as a cost-cutting measure again. But the long-term impact, in terms of skills development and retention of staff, may be different. So, there they are. 5 strategy questions that every leader should make time for. But strategic thinking should not just be reserved for the top levels of leadership. Managers at all levels of the organisation would benefit from posing the same questions of their own teams. Making time to reflect on these big questions will help you to effectively challenge habits or established processes that do not necessarily serve you as best as they can. Making time for strategic thinking is key to fostering a culture of creativity and innovation, anticipating difficulties, and making the best decisions. Switching mental gears to consider the big picture requires a conscious effort. So make the time that it requires.